When a humble maid is humiliated by a wealthy hotel manager who doubts her worth, she accepts his challenge, unaware that inside her bag lies the document that will turn his empire upside down and prove that true luxury isn't found in the penthouse, but in the greatness of those who choose respect. Before we continue, subscribe now to our channel to receive everyday powerful stories that touch the heart. Manhattan's evening rush bled into the revolving doors of the Whitman Crown Hotel. Marble floors reflected chandeliers like a river of light beneath hurried shoes. The concierge fielded calls while bellhops glided past with chrome carts whispering over stone. Executives in navy and charcoal clustered near the bar, their laughter crisp as ice. At the threshold, Luisa Alvarez paused, smoothing the seam of her thrifted blouse. A canvas backpack hung from one shoulder, frayed strap stitched by careful hands. She inhaled, tasting citrus cleaner and the faint sweetness of orchids by the elevators. Her shoes were practical, soles remembering long subway stairs and late buses. The front desk screens glowed soft blue, tallying rates and names and credit lines. Becca, the junior clerk, noticed Luisa's steady gaze and straightened her lapel. From a glass-walled office, Brandon Whitman stepped out, not of silk set razor tight. He carried the building's surname like a badge polished by entitlement. His glance skimmed Luisa once, measuring, then marking her as a mistake in motion. The lobby's music dimmed to a hush that wasn't on the playlist. Brandon's smile rose without warmth as he moved to intercept her path. Checking in, he asked, voice smooth enough to hide the edge beneath. Luisa nodded, palms dry despite the room's air-conditioned cool. She had counted tips all month, 3 jobs braided into one tiring promise. Becca opened a new reservation window and kept her eyes soft. Brandon leaned his elbows on the counter, staking territory with posture alone. He liked public scenes. He liked the way people looked at him while he made them small. "We're a premium property," he said, letting the words select their audience. A couple in designer coats pivoted to watch, curiosity as bright as their cufflinks. A bellhop slowed beside a column, pretending to adjust his gloves. Luisa met Brandon's gaze with a stillness that unsettled his practiced cadence. The orchid swayed when the doors turned. The brass clock over the bar ticked clean seconds. Her heartbeat matched the clock, not quick, not hesitant, simply counted. She placed her ID on the counter with a motion that made no apology. Brandon's smile thinned, then sharpened into something performative. He raised his chin so his words would carry to the watching room. "Pay the daily rate and you'll get the penthouse," he said, a laugh riding shotgun. The phrase pricked the air and hung there, showy as a banner in a storm. Becca shot him a look that begged for decency and received none in return. Numbers flashed on the screen: tonight's rate, taxes, a security hold that could bruise a budget. Luisa's fingers brushed the zipper of her backpack where folded envelopes waited like quiet allies. Memories of overtime shifts lined up behind her, each hour a brick beneath her feet. She felt the lobby's collective breath tilt toward the spectacle he was staging. The chandelier hummed, or perhaps it was the building listening for a signature moment. She asked, evenly, "What is the daily rate tonight?" and didn't break eye contact. Brandon let the sum roll off his tongue as if currency were a toy with wheels. Someone near the bar muttered, "She'll walk," but the room's silence kept the words from landing. Luisa unzipped the backpack and set a worn wallet on the counter without ceremony. Brandon's laughter widened, bright as shattered glass, inviting witnesses to share the shine. A small green LED on the card reader woke like an eye opening in a dark room. Luisa slid a card forward, and the machine chimed once, then paused, holding the entire lobby with it. The pause stretched long enough for tension to settle into every polished surface. Louisa didn't flinch. Her eyes, steady and dark as cooled espresso, met Brandon's gleam without reflection. He expected trembling hands, apologies, excuses spilling out like loose change. Instead, she adjusted the strap of her backpack, the leather squeaking softly under pressure. "What is the daily rate again?" she asked, her voice even, trimmed of all fear. The words came like measured footsteps across fragile glass. Brandon blinked, thrown off by the absence of shame, by the calm precision in her tone. Becca shifted, offering an awkward half-smile, trying to bridge the widening gulf of discomfort. Her fingers hovered near the keyboard, as if mercy might be entered into the system. Louisa stood firm beneath the amber light filtering through chandeliers. Her poise fractured the performance Brandon had orchestrated for the crowd. It was no longer a scene of humiliation. It was becoming an examination. Someone coughed by the bar. Another adjusted his tie. Even the orchid seemed to lean forward, waiting. Brandon's smirk faltered, but pride refused retreat. He repeated the rate, louder this time, as if volume could restore authority. Louisa nodded slowly, letting the number settle. She opened her wallet with the patience of someone who has worked too long to rush now. Bills folded precisely, a debit card with worn edges, a small photograph tucked behind the plastic sleeve. The face of a boy smiling in a school uniform peeked through, a reminder, not a weakness. Becca's eyes caught the photo for half a heartbeat and softened, the truth clicking into place. Louisa wasn't here for luxury. She was here to keep a promise made to someone who mattered. Brandon mistook the silence for surrender. "It's fine if you can't," he said, voice sugared with superiority. But she didn't look at him. She looked at the glowing card reader instead, as if negotiating with fate. The weight of her composure began to pull the air tighter around them. Brandon folded his arms, drumming impatience against his cufflinks. A bellhop whispered to another, "She's really doing it." The words rippled quietly through the spectators like an underground current. Louisa held the card between her fingers, the plastic cool, the moment warmer than it should have been. Becca hesitated, torn between rules and empathy. "Ma'am, are you sure?" she asked softly. Louisa nodded once, decisive. The tap of the card against the reader was almost soundless, but it struck through the room like thunder. Processing lights blinked, a rhythm of green, amber, hesitation. Brandon's expression folded into something expectant, hungry for a decline he could savor. The machine whirred, calculating worth in milliseconds that felt eternal. Becca's breath hitched. Her hand hovered above the keyboard, ready to apologize. Louisa stood motionless, her spine straight as if anchored by invisible roots. The world outside the glass doors continued, taxis honking, rain starting to pepper the pavement. Inside, every sound had gone silent. Then came a soft chime, high and definitive. On the screen, one word bloomed in bold green letters, approved. Becca's relief came first, a faint exhale. Brandon's laughter died mid-breath, replaced by a flicker of disbelief he couldn't mask. The bystanders shifted, glances trading shock for quiet admiration. Louisa lowered her card slowly, her eyes never leaving his. The word approved glowed on the monitor, but Brandon's smirk returned almost instantly, forced back into place like a cracked mask. He leaned closer to the counter, lowering his voice just enough for everyone nearby to still hear. "Of course," he said, brushing invisible lint from his cuff. "That was just the base rate. We have additional policies for guests without prior reservations." The way he said guests sounded more like trespassers. Becca froze, her fingers hovering uncertainly above the keyboard. "Mr. Whitman," she began carefully, "that's not." but his sharp glance silenced her mid-word. He turned back to Louisa, tone now syrupy with false professionalism. "We require a pre-authorization," he continued. "A rather substantial one. $2,000. The number sliced through the air like a blade. Conversations across the lobby dimmed again, curiosity blooming like wildfire. Brandon wasn't following protocol. He was performing. A public spectacle draped in the language of policy. He added, "And, of course, a matching deposit in cash. Hotel standards, you understand." His smile said he expected her to break here, where most people would. Louisa's hand tightened around the wallet still on the counter. Her breath came slow, even, like the controlled rhythm of someone refusing to let pride slip away. The spectators had gathered closer, some pretending to scroll their phones, others openly watching, their screens discreetly tilted for recording. The hum of a phone camera cut faintly through the air. She could feel the heat of attention pressing against her back, 1,000 judgments dressed as curiosity. Becca shifted her weight, murmuring, "That's not really standard, sir." Brandon ignored her. "Identification, please," he added smoothly. "Government issued. We'll need to verify authenticity manually." The phrase manually wasn't policy, it was theater. Louisa opened the front pocket of her bag and slid forward her passport, the edges soft from years of travel between states, between survival. Brandon picked it up with the tips of his fingers, as if touching it could tarnish the suit he wore. He inspected it for too long, flipping it over as though searching for counterfeit ink. The act was unnecessary. The cruelty was deliberate. The orchids by the elevator swayed again in the air-conditioning draft, fragile witnesses to pride and prejudice. Someone whispered, "This is too much." Brandon placed the passport down slowly, aligning it perfectly with the edge of the counter. "The system will need to run the pre-authorization," he said, gesturing at Becca. Her fingers trembled slightly as she entered the new figure. The number blinked on screen, $2,000 hold. She hesitated before pressing enter. "Are you sure, sir? This could." "Proceed." Brandon cut in, his voice smooth but cracking faintly under the strain of performance. The machine came alive again, the same green and amber lights pulsing like heartbeat monitors. Louisa didn't look away. Behind her, phones were raised subtly, stories waiting to be captured, posted, shared. Outside, rain traced slow silver paths down the glass, distorting the city lights. Inside, time seemed to stall as the card reader processed, a small machine holding judgment over dignity. Brandon's lips parted, ready to gloat or grin, whichever suited the verdict. Then came the soft electronic tone again, longer this time, deeper. The word appeared in bold green letters once more, approved. The sound of Brandon's silence was louder than any applause. The faint beep of approval lingered like a note suspended in a cathedral. Becca's shoulders loosened, a breath of quiet triumph slipping through her lips. On the screen, the transaction glowed steady. $489 room rate plus $600 deposit. Approved. Louisa stood still, her composure a kind of rebellion sharper than any words. The murmur in the lobby began as a ripple, soft disbelief, the sound of gossip turning into respect. A man in a tailored suit leaned toward his wife and whispered, "She actually paid it." Two teenagers near the entrance pretended to check their phones while secretly recording. Even the bellhop who had been smirking moments ago now kept his eyes lowered, ashamed. The grand clock above the reception ticked once, twice, marking a shift in the air. Brandon's grin faltered just slightly, enough for Becca to notice. He leaned forward again, elbows spreading wide on the counter, reclaiming ground with posture alone. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "that's certainly impressive." The compliment carried poison under its skin. His pride had been bruised, and bruises always beg for retaliation. The audience, sensing it, waited for his next move. Louisa collected her passport from the counter, sliding it gently into her bag. Her movements remained unhurried, like someone arranging truth in plain sight. Becca handed her the printed receipt, eyes darting nervously toward Brandon. He was already recalibrating, swallowing the shock, forcing control back into his tone. That was the room rate, he began, pacing behind the desk as if circling prey. But of course, the Whitman crown holds higher standards for comfort. He tapped the marble counter with his index finger, rhythm deliberate, drawing attention back to himself. Guests of your situation might not be familiar with premium accommodations. Louisa's brow arched just slightly, a small rebellion that felt louder than any argument. Becca interjected softly, "Mr. Whitman, the reservation is confirmed." He raised a hand to silence her, his gaze fixed on Louisa like a hunter refusing to lose the chase. A murmur of unease moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Just let her check in." Brandon ignored them, smoothing his tie, masking insecurity with elegance. He smiled, a perfect curve of cruelty disguised as charm. "That's not all," he said finally, voice silk over glass. The words drew a fresh hush over the lobby, curiosity reigniting like flame meeting oxygen. Becca froze mid-motion, the printed keycard trembling in her hand. Brandon leaned forward again, lowering his tone but not his arrogance. "There's a premium service fee," he announced, "for unregistered guests. Policy requires it." The line was fiction, but he delivered it with the conviction of a practiced liar. Louisa said nothing. Her silence carried weight, not weakness. She reached once more for her wallet, the gesture deliberate, slow, unshaken. Brandon's confidence swelled again, mistaking dignity for naivety. He thought she was too proud to stop now, too trapped by the eyes around them. Becca tried again. "Sir, there's no such policy." Her protest died under his stare, sharp as a blade of glass. Brandon turned back to Louisa, smiling as though the outcome had already been written. Outside, lightning flared across the glass facade, reflecting off chrome luggage and designer shoes. Inside, Louisa's shadow stretched long against the marble floor, still and composed. Brandon's hand hovered over the register, ready to raise the stakes once more. Brandon's voice regained its theatrical luster, the kind that carried well in rooms made for performance. "Of course," he said, straightening his tie with exaggerated patience. "There's still one final verification step." The phrase "final verification" echoed against the marble as if the walls themselves doubted him. He gestured toward Becca's screen, tone casual but cutting. "For guests without prior booking history," he explained, "we require a proof of funds, just to maintain the hotel's standards." Becca blinked, startled. "Sir, that's not." He silenced her again, this time with a smile sharp enough to draw blood without breaking skin. His words dripped false courtesy. "I'm sure Miss Alvarez understands. It's protocol for exclusivity." The crowd sensed the lie, but curiosity held them still, like spectators at a car crash they couldn't look away from. Louisa inhaled through her nose, slow and deliberate, grounding herself in a dignity money could never buy. Her gaze didn't flicker, even as the unspoken accusation hung thick between them. Becca's fingers curled under the counter, her knuckles whitening. The soft hum of rain outside seemed to tap its protest against the glass. Louisa nodded once. "Of course," she said quietly. "You want proof. I'll show you proof." Brandon leaned back, satisfied. He thought victory had finally taken form. She pulled out her phone and unlocked the screen. Her fingertips moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to document her worth for survival. She opened her banking app. The glow of the screen cast pale light over her steady expression. Numbers appeared, modest, not impressive by luxury standards, but clean, honest, real. Every digit was earned from double shifts, overnight cleaning contracts, and hours nobody had noticed. Becca's eyes softened as she saw the balance. It was enough, more than enough for 3 nights in any hotel. Louisa turned the screen toward Brandon without ceremony. "This should be sufficient for your standards," she said, her voice smooth, without tremor. Brandon hesitated. He hadn't expected her to comply. His plan relied on shame, not evidence. The murmurs in the crowd turned, tones shifting from curiosity to admiration. A woman whispered, "She's brave." Another man adjusted his collar, visibly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before him. Becca's heart pounded. She wanted to say something, anything, to stop this charade. But Brandon's pride wasn't finished. He let out a short, hollow laugh that rang false even to his own ears. "Come on," he said, voice pitched for the audience now. "Anyone can show a screenshot." The sneer slid through his words, cold and deliberate. "What's to say this isn't an act?" He gestured at the phone like it carried contagion. A few gasps punctured the air. The cruelty had turned overt, undeniable. Louisa's hand didn't waver. Her silence drew the attention of everyone around them, the kind of stillness that magnifies every sound. Becca spoke at last, her voice trembling. "Sir, please." "That's enough." Brandon ignored her completely. He addressed the growing crowd with a smirk. "She's putting on quite a show, isn't she?" The words landed like stones skipping across calm water, spreading ripples of discomfort. Becca's cheeks burned, torn between her job and her conscience. Louisa lowered her phone, eyes locking on Brandon's with a composure that silenced the room. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant, as if the city itself disapproved. And then, from somewhere near the revolving doors, a woman's voice cut through the tension. "Actually, I can verify her story." The crowd parted slightly as the doors to the Whitman Crown rotated once more, letting in a rush of cool air and the scent of wet pavement. Heels clicked in measured confidence across the marble. A woman in a tailored navy suit, her hair pinned with precision, stepped into the tension like it belonged to her. She carried an aura of practiced authority, the kind that made people straighten unconsciously. Becca's face lit with recognition before she even spoke. "Avery Collins," she whispered under her breath, too low for most to hear. Attorney, philanthropist, and member of the board of the Whitman Foundation, the same foundation whose name gleamed in silver above the entrance. Brandon froze, the charm draining from his expression faster than he could replace it. Avery's eyes swept the lobby once, registering the strange tableau, a man of status cornering a woman with weary eyes and quiet dignity. Then her gaze landed on Louisa, and something in her demeanor softened instantly. Her lips parted, not in surprise, but in recognition. "Louisa Alvarez?" she asked, voice clear and melodic, slicing through the thick silence. Louisa blinked, caught between disbelief and relief she hadn't dared to expect. The crowd inhaled collectively, soundless but palpable. Becca's fingers tightened around the countertop. Brandon straightened, masking unease with forced politeness. "Miss Collins," he greeted, smoothing his tie again. "What a pleasant surprise. We weren't expecting." "I wasn't expected," she cut in, tone cool but firm. Her attention remained on Louisa, not on him. "You're the nurse who volunteered at St. Jude's 3 years ago," she said slowly, as memory threaded recognition into clarity. "You were with the Children's Recovery Wing, right? The bilingual caregiver who—" Louisa nodded once. almost shyly, though her spine remained straight. "Yes, ma'am. I was one of the volunteers." The tension in the lobby shifted yet again, no longer curiosity, but confusion thick with speculation. Avery smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried weight beyond politeness. "You probably don't remember," she continued, "but the Foundation never forgot your name." Brandon's throat tightened. Well, this is all rather unfortunate," Avery supplied smoothly, eyes flicking toward him. Her tone made the single word sound like a verdict already passed. Every phone lowered. No one dared record now. Avery turned fully toward Louisa, her posture easing as warmth replaced scrutiny. "I'm so glad to see you again," she said sincerely. "We've been trying to reach you for months." Louisa's brows drew together. "Reach me?" "Yes," Avery replied. "The Foundation has been updating our list of anonymous grant recipients, those who helped launch our medical assistance initiative." She paused, scanning Louisa's face for a trace of recollection. "You filled out a form years ago, remember? Under a pseudonym. You refused compensation, said the kids needed it more than you." Louisa's breath caught in her throat, the memory flickering like a fragile light returning after darkness. Brandon blinked, color rising to his cheeks as realization began to brew like thunder. Around them, whispers fluttered through the lobby, fragments of awe, regret, recognition. Becca's eyes darted between Avery and Louisa, her heart thudding with disbelief. Avery crossed her arms, her voice steady now. "Tell me, Mr. Whitman, did you really just demand proof of funds from one of our benefactors?" Brandon's mouth opened, but no sound came. The question hung heavy in the marble silence, daring him to answer. The sound of rain intensified outside, each droplet striking the glass facade like an echo of tension breaking inside. Avery moved closer to the counter, the hem of her navy jacket brushing lightly against the marble edge. Her tone softened now, the sharpness of authority blending with genuine respect. "She's not just a guest, Brandon," she said clearly, ensuring every word reached the circle of bystanders. "Louisa is in the city for tomorrow night's Whitman Foundation Gala. She's one of our invitees, personally recommended by the board." The words rippled through the lobby like a gust through still air. Becca's eyes widened. A bellhop's mouth fell open before he caught himself. Even the concierge froze mid-step, the name of the event carrying instant recognition. It was the gala of the year, an evening meant to fund pediatric intensive care families across the country. Avery turned to Louisa, her voice gentler. "We wanted to honor you publicly, Louisa. The trust you inspired at St. Jude's helped create our Family Recovery Fund." For a heartbeat, Louisa said nothing. She simply stood there, caught between gratitude and disbelief, her throat tightening. The woman who had been treated like a fraud moments ago was now revealed as someone who had quietly changed lives. Brandon's composure cracked like a hairline fracture in glass. He forced a shallow laugh, brittle as it was hollow. A murmur swept through the lobby, admiration mixing uneasily with shame. Louisa's eyes dropped to the marble floor, where reflections shimmered under chandelier light. She didn't seem to bask in the revelation. Instead, there was something solemn in her expression, as though the memory of those hospital rooms still lived behind her gaze. She remembered the sound of machines, the rhythm of hope and heartbreak woven through beeping monitors. The children who had smiled at her with oxygen tubes beneath their noses. The parents who had whispered, "Thank you," with eyes red from sleepless nights. Every moment of her journey had been built quietly, brick by brick, unseen and uncelebrated it. Now, the very people who had dismissed her were staring as if seeing her for the first time. Avery rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The gala isn't just about donations," she continued. It's about acknowledging the ordinary people whose compassion sustains our mission. Brandon's jaw flexed, his silence louder than any protest. The weight of his own arrogance began to sink in, though pride refused to let him drown just yet. He forced another grin, but it came out crooked, strained. "Well," he said lightly, "that's quite the touching story." Becca flinched. The room stilled again. "Touching," he repeated, his tone now threaded with sarcasm. "I'm sure it'll make a lovely speech tomorrow night. Heartwarming, inspiring, all that." He straightened his cufflinks, performing calm even as insecurity gnawed underneath. "But let's not exaggerate," he added, looking directly at Luisa. "Lots of people volunteer, Miss Alvarez. It doesn't mean they belong in penthouses." The cruelty was subtler now, wrapped in politeness, but everyone felt the sting. Avery's expression cooled instantly. "This isn't about belonging, Brandon," she said. "It's about values. You of all people should know that." "Values," he echoed, forcing a chuckle that failed to land. "Right. I'm just ensuring our brand integrity, that's all." He gestured around the lobby as if the chandeliers and marble columns were his jury. "We can't let emotional stories replace standards, can we?" The audience shifted, their sympathy leaning harder toward Luisa now. Becca's voice trembled. "Mr. Whitman, please stop." He didn't. His smirk widened, desperate to reclaim superiority. "Tell you what," he said, glancing at Avery before locking eyes with Luisa again. "If you think you deserve that penthouse, prove it." Brandon's smirk returned in full force, confidence reborn through cruelty. He took one measured step forward, the leather of his shoes whispering against marble. "Tell you what," he said, tone coated in charm but hollow underneath. "If you can prove you deserve to be here, I'll personally hand you the key to the penthouse." Gasps scattered across the lobby like dropped glass. Becca's hand flew to her mouth. Avery's jaw tightened. Even the guests who had lingered out of idle curiosity now leaned closer, sensing the moral line being crossed. Brandon straightened his cufflinks again, performing composure before his unseen camera crew of strangers. He thrived on eyes. Attention was the currency of his ego. The silence that followed wasn't approval, though. It was disbelief, heavy and judgmental. Luisa's gaze didn't waver. "And what exactly do you mean by prove?" Her words were calm, precise, cutting through the air like a surgeon's scalpel. Brandon's smile grew thinner, revealing the strain beneath. "Oh, I don't know," he said, feigning thoughtfulness. "Show me something that says you belong among the people who actually own this place." The insult, wrapped in velvet, landed with brutal clarity. Avery's expression turned to stone. Luisa drew in a slow breath, letting it fill her chest before releasing it just as gently. Her fingers brushed against her backpack strap, the frayed fabric grounding her. Around her, faces shifted, some pitying, others ashamed, none indifferent. A businessman near the elevator whispered to his wife, "He's gone too far." The woman nodded, eyes fixed on Luisa with something like silent encouragement. The hum of the hotel air system filled the space between words, its rhythm steady and cold. Becca's pulse hammered in her ears as she glanced at Avery, hoping she would intervene. But Avery's gaze remained steady on Brandon, studying him, waiting to see the depths of his downfall. "You're asking her to humiliate herself for your entertainment," she said quietly. He shrugged. "I'm asking her to prove her place." "Her place," Avery repeated, the phrase tasting like ash. "Yes," Brandon said, a touch too loudly, as though volume could drown guilt. The crowd began to form a circle, an unspoken tribunal. Their silence pressed down on the space between Luisa and Brandon, thick as fog. Luisa looked around and saw more than spectators. She saw witnesses, and she knew what that meant. She She reached for her bag and placed it carefully on the counter. I followed the motion. The zipper opened with a sound that seemed to slice through the stillness. Inside, there was no display of luxury, only documents, envelopes, and a small leather case worn at the edges. Her hand paused over it, the way one touches something sacred. Brandon's smirk twitched, curiosity briefly piercing his arrogance. "Go on then," he said lightly. "What's inside?" Another screenshot. Becca flinched, muttering a quiet, "Please, stop." But Louisa didn't stop. She drew the case out, laid it flat on the counter, and looked Brandon in the eye. Her voice was soft but steady. "You want proof? Fine. But remember, you asked for this." The weight of her calm turned his smirk into a flicker of unease. Around them, the lobby was silent except for the slow tick of the clock above the bar. The city beyond the glass had gone silver with rain, as if holding its breath. Brandon's arrogance trembled, just slightly, as she reached for the latch of the case. No one in the room knew what was coming next, but everyone felt the air change. The latch on the leather case clicked, a sound so small it seemed impossible that it could shift the weight of an entire room. Inside, neatly folded and sealed with wax, lay an envelope marked with a gold crest, its seal bearing the initials HW. The crowd murmured at once. Even Becca recognized the emblem embossed on countless company plaques. Harold Whitman, the late founder of the Whitman Crown Group, and Brandon's father. Louisa lifted the envelope carefully, her fingers steady despite the tremor of emotion moving beneath the surface. Brandon's breath hitched before he could disguise it. That seal was sacred within the corporation, reserved for official, notarized internal documents. "Where did you get that?" he asked sharply, stepping forward, tone cracking at the edges. Louisa met his stare without blinking. "From the office of the Whitman Foundation's legal department," she said. Her eyes flicked toward Avery, who nodded once to confirm it. "This letter was signed 3 months before Harold Whitman passed away," Avery added quietly. The lobby fell still, the weight of legacy suddenly anchoring every gaze. Brandon's expression twisted between disbelief and fear. Louisa broke the seal, the paper's soft tear echoing louder than thunder outside. When she unfolded it, the letter's heading gleamed beneath the lights. Memorandum of Intent, Employee Stewardship Trust. Brandon's lips parted soundlessly. Louisa began to read aloud, her voice calm, measured, deliberate. "To all managers and executive staff of the Whitman Crown Group," she began, eyes scanning the handwritten ink. "This memorandum serves to establish the formation of an employee stewardship trust, a system of anonymous ethical auditing across all divisions of our hospitality network." The words struck like hammers on marble. Brandon blinked rapidly, shaking his head. "That's ridiculous. That document." But Avery raised a hand, silencing him. "It's legitimate," she said. "It's registered with the corporate notary. I verified the stamp myself." Louisa continued reading, her tone unwavering. "This initiative will ensure that every member of staff, regardless of rank or income, is treated with respect and fairness. Discrimination, abuse of authority, or misuse of privilege shall be documented and reviewed by an independent facilitator." She paused, glancing briefly at the crowd, whose faces now reflected a mixture of awe and discomfort. Even those who had watched for entertainment now stood solemn, realizing the gravity of what they were witnessing. Brandon's color drained completely. "That's not public information," he stammered. "No one was supposed to." Louisa folded the paper halfway, letting the silence hum. Avery stepped closer, her voice clear and cool as crystal. "The memorandum also designates a specific person," she said. a neutral party appointed to conduct these internal evaluations discreetly across all properties. Her gaze lingered on Brandon. Your father insisted on full autonomy for that auditor. No interference, no favoritism. The audience leaned in unconsciously, drawn by the slow, deliberate rhythm of revelation. Louisa traced one line of ink with her fingertip, her breath calm. Beneath the formal text, the founder's final signature curved elegantly in blue fountain pen. Then came the final sentence, written in neat block letters beneath the seal. Designated facilitator and ethical auditor, Ms. Luisa Alvarez. The words shimmered faintly under the chandelier's light, undeniable, irrevocable. A collective gasp broke through the lobby like a rush of wind. Becca's hand covered her mouth. Avery's eyes closed briefly in solemn confirmation. Brandon took a step back as if struck, his father's name echoing through his mind like a reprimand from the grave. The document trembled faintly in Luisa's grasp, but her voice remained steady as she said softly, I was appointed to make sure no one here forgets what respect looks like. And for the first time that night, Brandon had no words at all. The name lingered in the air like an echo that refused to fade. Luisa Alvarez, written beneath the founder's seal, legitimized by ink and intention. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even the rain outside seemed to hesitate mid-fall. Brandon's throat worked, but no sound escaped. The woman he had mocked in front of strangers now stood as the official guardian of his father's moral legacy. Luisa folded the letter gently, not triumphantly, but with reverence, as though returning a sacred relic to its altar. Avery's gaze softened. Harold Whitman chose her himself, she explained quietly, addressing the silent crowd. He met Ms. Alvarez during his hospitalization 3 years ago. She was a part-time nurse on rotation, not even full staff. Becca's eyes widened, realization dawning with awe. Avery continued. He requested to remain under her care during his recovery. Said she was the only one who spoke to him like a person, not a paycheck. A hush spread like ripples across the marble floor. Brandon's eyes darted from the document to Luisa, disbelief breaking through the last fragments of arrogance. He never told me that, he muttered, voice unsteady. Avery's look held something almost like pity. No, Brandon. He didn't tell anyone. He wanted to see who you really were. The words struck him harder than any slap. Luisa stood quietly, her expression unreadable. The memory of the man she'd cared for returned in fragments. The tremor in his hands, the quiet humor in his eyes, the way he spoke of legacy with the gentleness of regret. He had been kind, but weary, weighed down by what power had done to those he loved. In those nights, she'd sat beside his bed, adjusting machines and telling him stories from her childhood. She'd seen the loneliness that wealth could never soften. He'd once told her, money doesn't reveal character, Luisa. It amplifies it. Now, in this lobby glittering with chandeliers, those words had come full circle. Becca exhaled softly, tears brightening her eyes without falling. The other guests, those who had filmed, judged, whispered, shifted with visible shame. Even the bellhop who had laughed earlier now bowed his head. Brandon gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles pale. This can't be real, he whispered, but it was. The seal, the signature, the timing, all irrefutable. His father's voice, immortalized in ink, had chosen the one person he had just humiliated. Luisa looked at him calmly and said, he believed integrity should walk quietly but be seen when it's needed. The quiet conviction in her tone left no space for denial. Avery stepped closer, her voice cutting through the thick silence. Brandon, your fathers will specify that the auditor was to remain anonymous during evaluations, so she could witness the truth. Her gaze hardened slightly. You were her first unscheduled inspection. The realization landed with brutal precision. Brandon's posture faltered. The authority he'd wielded like a weapon disintegrated into panic. He looked around, searching for something, an escape, an ally, maybe forgiveness, but found only faces turned against him. Louisa didn't gloat. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a quiet, steady grief. She had not come to humiliate him. She had come to see what the empire had become without its founder's guidance. Your father wanted humility to be part of this place, she said softly. He hoped you'd remember what that looks like. Brandon's mouth opened, but the words tangled in his throat. Every defense, every clever phrase, every layer of entitlement collapsed beneath the weight of revelation. He had mocked the very person his father had trusted above anyone else. And now, every eye in the lobby bore witness as the heir of Whitman Crown realized he had just humiliated his father's final wish. He swallowed hard, the sound almost audible, and whispered hoarsely, What happens now?" Avery reached into her blazer pocket, drawing out her phone with a precision that made the crowd instinctively lean forward. "Let's make this official," she said, her tone calm, yet edged with finality. Brandon's eyes followed the motion with dread. "That's unnecessary," he muttered, voice cracking. But Avery had already tapped the speaker icon. A dial tone pulsed through the hush like a heartbeat echoing in marble. After 2 rings, a male voice answered crisply, "Collins? Is this about the Whitman audit file?" "Yes," Avery said, her tone professional. "Confirm for everyone here that the facilitator designated by Harold Whitman is, in fact, Ms. Luisa Alvarez." The man's voice came firm and immediate. "Confirmed. The notarized document grants her full review authority over personnel, compliance, and ethical conduct across all Whitman properties." Gasps moved through the lobby like wind through a field. Brandon's complexion had gone pale, the weight of legitimacy crushing what fragments of denial he had left. Avery continued, "And what power does that authority include?" The speakerphone crackled softly before the answer came. "Measured, legal, irreversible. She is empowered to conduct audits, recommend sanctions, and submit binding reports directly to the Board of Trustees." Brandon's hand tightened on the counter until his knuckles whitened. The crowd's silence deepened, filled now with the gravity of official truth. Becca took a small, shaky step forward. "Ms. Collins," she said, her voice nervous but clear, "may I say something?" Avery nodded gently. Becca swallowed hard, her pulse visible in her throat. "Mr. Whitman, he told me to override the regular check-in procedure. He said to mark the system as non-compliant so her payment would flag as irregular." A ripple of murmurs crossed the room, each word igniting new sparks of disapproval. Brandon's head snapped toward her. "Becca, that's not. It's true," she insisted, voice trembling but firm. "He told me, let her try. Let the system tell her she doesn't belong here." Her confession cracked through the silence like lightning across a black sky. Avery's gaze hardened. "Thank you, Becca. Your honesty will be noted." The lawyer on the phone spoke again, his voice heavy with corporate finality. "Ms. Collins, please document this conversation. The board will request a formal report." "I already am," she replied. Brandon's breathing grew uneven, panic crowding behind his ribs. He glanced toward the elevators, calculating an escape route that didn't exist. Louisa remained still, her calm an unspoken mirror reflecting his unraveling pride. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving streaks of silver across the glass that mirrored the streaks of sweat on Brandon's temple. The light from the chandeliers shimmered cold and impartial. Every person in that lobby, employees, guests, even the security guard by the door, knew the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Avery turned to the phone again. "You heard the statement, Mr. Jacobs?" "Yes," the man replied. "Per company bylaws, any managerial interference with audit procedures constitutes an ethics violation subject to disciplinary action." Brandon flinched. Avery ended the call with a gentle press of her thumb, the screen going dark but leaving its verdict glowing in the silence. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and faced Brandon. "You've left a trail," she said quietly. "Every word, every instruction, it's recorded. Your father's system was designed for transparency." The words felt like the closing of a door that would never open again. Becca's eyes shimmered with restrained tears, not for him, but for the wreckage arrogance had left behind. Louisa exhaled softly, neither angry nor vindictive, simply resolute. The truth was now undeniable, the evidence airtight, and the eyes of justice, all of them, were fixed on Brandon. He looked at Avery, then at Louisa, voice breaking. "What are you going to do to me?" The room held its breath as Louisa finally stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice, didn't lean on the power the document had handed her. She simply stood, centered in a halo of quiet authority. Her tone was low, steady, but it filled the space more completely than any order could. "The problem," she began, eyes fixed on Brandon, "isn't the penthouse. It's how you treat people." Her words floated upward, clear and deliberate, cutting through the hum of shame that filled the lobby. Every syllable carried the weight of a lesson long overdue. "You made this about money, about appearances," she continued. "But my audit, your father's program, was never about either." Becca nodded faintly, hands clasped against her chest. Brandon said nothing. He couldn't. His reflection shimmered faintly in the polished marble floor, a fractured image of the man he thought he was. Louisa took a slow breath before speaking again. "This hotel has standards, not of luxury, but of dignity. Standards your staff have been struggling to uphold while leadership forgot." Her eyes softened, not with pity, but with purpose. "I'm not here to ruin reputations, Mr. Whitman. I'm here to rebuild integrity." A hush fell over the room so deep that even the ticking clock seemed to wait for her next words. Avery folded her arms, watching closely as Louisa turned her attention toward the audience that had become witness, jury, and mirror. Effective immediately, Louisa said, "I'll recommend a full internal evaluation of this property's leadership culture." Becca's breath caught. This wasn't vengeance, it was reform. "There will be mandatory ethics and empathy training for all managerial staff," Louisa continued. "Not a seminar you can sleep through, but an ongoing practice measured by real behavior." Her words carried authority not through punishment, but through reason. "Every manager will undergo a 360-degree performance review, with anonymous feedback from employees and guests alike." Whispers spread through the crowd, but no one interrupted. They were hearing something rare, accountability without cruelty. Brandon's pulse thudded in his ears, his mind struggling to catch up with the reality that the woman he'd insulted now held the blueprint for his redemption. Louisa wasn't here to destroy him. She was here to hold up a mirror and make him see. "And one more thing," she added, her voice unwavering. "Executive bonuses will be tied to respect metrics, measurable, documented, and audited quarterly." A collective gasp rippled across the floor like wind through glass. Even Avery blinked, impressed. Louisa's calm was relentless, her clarity undeniable. Brandon finally found his voice, thin and uneven. You're serious." Louisa met his gaze evenly. "Your father was." The sentence landed with quiet precision, pulling the last thread of resistance from him. He lowered his eyes, shoulders sagging under the weight of realization. For the first time, He wasn't surrounded by admirers or employees, but by witnesses to his humbling. The energy in the room shifted again, less fury now, more reflection. Becca stepped forward and whispered, "She's giving you a chance." Louisa turned her attention briefly to Avery. "The foundation will monitor progress directly. Reports will be transparent. Failures will be visible." Avery nodded, already drafting the follow-up plan in her mind. Then Louisa faced Brandon once more, her tone softer now, but still firm. "You can't buy respect. You earn it, one action at a time. This hotel will become an example, either of change or of what happens when change is refused." Her words left no middle ground. Brandon looked up, searching her expression for vengeance and finding only conviction. He swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. "What do you want me to do?" Louisa's eyes held his, calm and steady as dawn breaking over glass towers. "Learn," she said simply, "before the world learns who you've become." Brandon stood motionless, the grandeur of the lobby now a cage of mirrors reflecting his undoing. The marble floor beneath him gleamed like ice, beautiful, cold, and indifferent. Louisa regarded him silently for a moment, weighing not punishment but purpose. Her expression wasn't cruel. It was the look of someone measuring how to rebuild what had been broken. When she finally spoke, her words were gentle and final all at once. "You won't lose your position," she said, "but you will lose your pedestal." A ripple moved through the onlookers, half relief, half disbelief. Brandon blinked, the meaning catching up slowly. "You'll step away from executive duties for 90 days, she continued. "You'll rotate through the hotel's ground operations." His brow furrowed. "Ground operations?" "Yes," Louisa said softly. "You'll learn the hotel you think you run, from the bottom up." Her tone held no mockery, only truth. "You'll work in housekeeping, at the front desk, and on the night audit team. Every guest you once looked through, you'll now serve." The murmurs that followed weren't mocking. They were approving. Even those who'd come for spectacle began to see the lesson unfolding into justice. Becca's eyes filled with quiet gratitude. Avery only nodded, her approval silent but firm. Brandon's jaw tightened. The word serve burned, not from shame but recognition. He opened his mouth to object, but Louisa lifted a hand, her voice calm but absolute. "It doesn't end there," she said. "You'll complete 40 hours of volunteer work with the Whitman Foundation's pediatric outreach." Gasps rippled through the room again. Louisa continued, her tone even. "You'll work beside the families your father's fund was built to protect. You'll see the faces behind the donations." Brandon's protest died in his throat. Images flickered in his mind. The gala speeches he'd delivered without meaning. The hollow applause of people who'd never known struggle. Now he would face the truth behind those smiles. Avery stepped in gently. "It's fair," she said. "You'll report directly to me during the program. Upon completion, the board will reassess your role." The balance between consequence and redemption was precise, surgical. It wasn't vengeance, it was discipline shaped by empathy. Louisa folded her hands in front of her. "This isn't about punishment, Brandon. It's about restoring what your father built." Her gaze softened slightly. "You have his name. Now earn his vision." The silence that followed was heavier than applause. Brandon bowed his head, words failing him for the first time in years. Outside, the city glowed beneath the rain, streaks of light bending across glass like forgiveness searching for a way in. Inside, the lobby had turned from theater to sanctuary, an audience of witnesses transformed into believers. The tension that had hung like fog began to clear, replaced by something gentler, respect rediscovered. Brandon exhaled, slow and uneven, a man beginning to understand humility for the first time. He turned to Louisa. "And while I'm learning," he said quietly, Who's going to run this place? It wasn't defiance, but genuine concern, perhaps even fear. Louisa regarded him thoughtfully, her silence deliberate, as if the answer already existed in the heart of the hotel itself. Becca stood at the edge of the counter, uncertain, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't expect to be noticed. She was just the voice behind the front desk, the invisible heartbeat of service. But Louisa's eyes found her, warm and steady. "You'll see soon enough," she said softly. Brandon followed her gaze and frowned, realization dawning faintly but not yet clear. The lobby leaned forward again, the unspoken question flickering in every breath. Who would take his place? Louisa turned toward Becca, who stood frozen behind the counter, still trying to shrink into invisibility. The young woman's face flushed as every gaze turned in her direction. Her hands fidgeted at her sides, but her eyes remained bright, honest, steadfast, the only pair in that lobby that had shown kindness when it counted. Louisa's voice carried warmth now, the firm tone of judgment replaced by gratitude. "Becca," she said gently, "you did something few people do under pressure. You tried to do the right thing when no one else dared." Becca's breath hitched. She hadn't expected acknowledgement, only relief that the ordeal was over. Brandon looked up, confusion flickering across his features as if realizing too late what true leadership looked like. Louisa continued, "As of today, you are appointed interim assistant manager for this property." A murmur of surprise swept the room, quickly followed by soft applause from a few guests who had remained to witness history rewrite itself. Becca's hands flew to her mouth. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Avery interjected with a rare smile. "You've earned it." Becca nodded, tears forming as she whispered, "Yes. Thank you. I won't let you down." "You already haven't," Louisa said kindly. The applause grew stronger, echoing against the marble and glass until even the chandeliers seemed to tremble with it. When the sound faded, Avery stepped closer to the counter, pulling a document from her folder. "This is a formal notice," she explained. "Effective immediately, the Whitman Crown Hotel will adopt a new operational code, the Respect First policy." Her voice projected, meant to be heard by employees and guests alike. It will be printed, framed, and placed in every department, from the penthouse to the laundry room. Every staff member will sign acknowledgement upon review. Louisa nodded, approving. "It's not just a policy, it's a promise," she added. Avery smiled faintly. "And the funding for the new hospitality training." Louisa glanced toward Brandon, whose head was still bowed in quiet resignation. He looked up slowly, meeting her eyes, and nodded once. "Taken from the hospitality excellence budget," he said quietly, "as it should be." His voice trembled with sincerity, not rehearsed, but real. Becca exhaled softly, as though the entire building had just breathed for the first time. Louisa extended her hand to her. "Lead with empathy," she said, "and teach others to do the same." Becca grasped it, steady now, the nervousness replaced by newfound strength. The cameras that had once recorded humiliation were now capturing something rarer, humility transformed into progress. The crowd began to disperse gradually, conversations buzzing with disbelief and admiration. Bellhops resumed their posts, guests collected their bags, and the hum of the hotel slowly reclaimed the air. But one question still lingered between the walls of glass and marble, unspoken but alive. It floated somewhere between gratitude and unfinished business. Brandon straightened, still pale but calmer now, and turned toward Louisa. His voice carried softly, barely above the hush of renewed normalcy. "You said something about proof earlier," he murmured. Louisa looked at him, puzzled for a heartbeat until she saw the faint ghost of a smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "The penthouse," he said. "You promised if she proved she belonged." Becca blinked, startled. A few heads turned back, curiosity rekindled. Louisa smiled faintly, the calm returning to her expression like light finding water. "Yes," she said softly. "I remember." The tension shifted again, lighter now, almost playful, as the meaning behind that promise hovered, waiting for its final chapter. And in that pause, every heart in the room leaned forward, wondering not whether Louisa had won, but what she would do with the victory. The keycard to the penthouse rested on the counter, its golden edges gleaming under the soft chandelier light. It was more than a piece of plastic. It was the symbol of everything that had been tested, broken, and quietly rebuilt that night. Brandon held it out, his hand trembling as though it weighed more than any title he had ever carried. "You earned this," he said quietly, his voice stripped of vanity. "The best room in the building, your rightful reward." Louisa looked down at the card, then at the faces surrounding her, the staff, the guests, Becca still holding back tears, Avery standing tall with quiet pride. Her expression softened with a mixture of warmth and gravity. "No," she said after a long moment. "I didn't earn this, but someone else did." Brandon frowned slightly, confused. Louisa turned to Becca. "Your co-worker, Miguel, the one who's been saving for his mother's treatment in the city. She's a nurse, isn't she?" Becca nodded quickly, emotion rising in her throat. "Yes, ma'am. She's due next week for a specialist appointment. They've been struggling to afford lodging." Louisa smiled gently, sliding the keycard across the counter toward her. "Then this room is hers, for as long as she needs it." A collective gasp broke into applause before anyone could stop it. The sound swelled like a wave of relief and redemption, washing over marble and glass. Brandon's eyes widened, disbelief melting into awe. "You're giving away the penthouse?" Louisa nodded, "Just borrowing it for a better purpose." Her tone carried no self-congratulation, only quiet certainty. "This building was meant to offer comfort," she said, "not just to those who can afford it, but to those who deserve dignity." Avery's throat tightened. Even she, the lawyer trained to measure everything in policy and numbers, felt the tremor of something deeper. The guests who had lingered out of curiosity now clapped freely, their applause no longer polite but heartfelt. Even the doorman at the far end of the hall wiped his eyes discreetly. Louisa looked around the lobby one last time, the chandeliers glowing like small suns, the hum of life returning. Her voice softened. "If this place remembers anything from tonight, let it be this. Kindness builds more loyalty than luxury ever will." Brandon swallowed hard, emotion catching him off guard. The words echoed his father's philosophy, the one buried beneath profit margins and marble polish. Becca nodded, whispering, "He'd be proud." Louisa met her gaze and smiled. "That's the goal." Then she turned toward the elevator, her footsteps unhurried, her purpose fulfilled. Behind her, applause rose again, not for spectacle, but for the restoration of something sacred, decency. As the doors closed, Avery exhaled softly and turned to Brandon. "She didn't take this suite," she said quietly, almost to herself. "No," he murmured, eyes still on the elevator lights climbing upward. "She gave it meaning." He glanced at the staff gathered nearby, their faces illuminated with renewed pride. "Effective immediately," he added. "The penthouse will serve as part of our Compassion Stay program, for guests in need of medical care or family support." Avery smiled faintly, approving. "Your father would have liked that." Brandon nodded, voice low. Maybe he planned it all along. And as the elevator reached the top floor with a soft chime, The story of one night's humiliation had become something greater, a reminder that the truest luxury isn't comfort, it's conscience. But upstairs, the letter with Harold Whitman's seal still rested on the marble counter, its last line yet unread, waiting for the morning light to reveal it. It would speak not to Louisa or Brandon, but to every generation that would inherit his empire. And its words would change everything once more. The elevator rose in near silence, its mirrored walls reflecting the softened glow of city lights bleeding through the glass. Avery stood beside Louisa, arms folded loosely, her gaze lifted toward the numbers ascending slowly above the doors. For the first time that night, the air was light. No tension, no judgment, only quiet relief. After a long moment, Avery broke the silence with a faint smile. "You know," she said softly, "your gesture downstairs, that's the kind of thing that changes culture." Louisa turned toward her, lips curving into a humble grin. "Culture doesn't change in boardrooms," she replied. "It changes in moments like that, when someone chooses decency over pride." Avery nodded, watching her reflection in the mirrored wall. "Still," she said, "I think Harold Whitman knew exactly what he was doing when he chose you." Louisa's expression softened, her thoughts briefly distant. "I think he just wanted to remind people what humanity looks like," she said. Her eyes lingered on the faint reflection of her own smile, tired but genuine. "Respect doesn't cost much," she added quietly. "What's missing isn't money, it's practice." Avery exhaled through a smile that reached her eyes. "Then let's make practice the new luxury." The elevator chimed softly, its doors opening to a corridor bathed in gold light, leading to the suite she had just given away. As they stepped out, the view of Manhattan stretched infinitely beyond the glass, skyscrapers shimmering like constellations born from human ambition. But tonight, the city seemed gentler, as though the world itself had exhaled. Louisa walked toward the window, her reflection blending with the skyline. Down below, life at the Whitman Crown resumed, phones ringing, guests laughing, staff moving with new purpose. The Respect First policy was already being printed at the front desk, its first framed copy waiting to be mounted by dawn. Becca's voice echoed faintly from the lobby below, giving new instructions with steady confidence. Brandon, somewhere on the ground floor, stood beside Miguel, offering, awkwardly but sincerely, to help schedule his mother's stay. Every story that had begun in arrogance was ending in humility, and every eye that had watched for scandal had instead witnessed transformation. Louisa watched the city lights shimmer like quiet applause and whispered, "Lesson complete." Avery smiled beside her, pressing the elevator button to descend again. "Until the next audit," she said. Louisa laughed softly, her voice warm as the dawn creeping across the skyline. "Hopefully," she said, "they won't need me for a while." The elevator doors closed gently, leaving only the panoramic view of the city and the folded letter still resting on the desk below. The camera lingered on it, the final line visible now under the morning glow. "Power reveals the heart. Choose to build, not to break." Harold Whitman. The screen faded to black, the echoes of applause from the lobby blending with the hum of the city waking below. Then, one final line appeared, simple and human, inviting reflection more than reaction. "Have you ever been judged by how you look? What would you have done in Louisa's place?" If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share this video so more people can discover that even the smallest act of courage can change the world. Write in the comments, "I believe in the power of courage." Together, let's keep spreading stories that transform lives and prove that hope can rise from the most unexpected voices. Thank you so much for your support.